Well, today we start a new series. And a couple of these stories that we're going to go through in this Profiles of Courage, they're familiar to us. We've heard them since we were children. The first one today, of course, is the 3 Hebrew children in the fiery furnace. We've heard that since we were, little kids in Sunday school. And then the next one, of course, will be Daniel in the lion's den. We've heard these. They're not unfamiliar to us, We've all had the felt board with the little, kind of sticky little lion stuck up there in the little furnace and the 3 little Hebrew children. And we grow up with these stories, and as we grow into adulthood, I think sometimes we lose the impact of the story because it's something so common to us. So when we look at these profiles of courage, I want us to take away a new understanding, a new depth that, it's a great little kid story, but oh my goodness, there's something here for us that in these days and in this time that we live in. You see, because the time that we live in is becoming and growing more and more evil. It's not something that's hidden from us. All you have to do is flip on the news. Check Facebook. Look at the internet news. Whatever you may do, read the newspaper, and you'll see that this age in which we live, it's getting rougher and rougher to be a Christian. And by rougher, I mean, how many times have we seen a news article where the 10 Commandments have been removed from a courthouse lawn? How many times at Christmas time have we seen a nativity scene being taken away? Hauled away on the back of a pickup because it offended somebody. Those that are offended by Jesus Christ and by our faith in Him are getting louder and louder and stronger, and they seem that they are prevailing. But I've read the back of the book. We win in the end. That's the bottom line of it. Jesus already won. We're just waiting on the victory. So this first profile we're going to look at, this profile of courage, is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And that's in Daniel 3. But I'm going to start out in Daniel 1 and kind of do a quick history lesson. The first time when these guys are mentioned are there in Daniel 1. And we find out that they were prisoners taken from Israel. That Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, picked these 3 boys out. And there were more, but particularly these 3 boys out. Because they were either royalty or of nobility, or they were without blemish and good of appearance. Or they could have been full of knowledge and wisdom and skillful. So for one of these reasons, he pulls these 3 Hebrews out, and Daniel as well with them. And we find that they get educated for 3 years. They take a master's course, if you will, in all the ways of the Chaldeans. We learn that they were also, like I said, friends of David. And the first conflict that we find them in is very early on. You see, by being taken in by the king, adopted if you will, granted special privileges, that meant that they were to eat from the king's table. So they were given the finest of foods, the most delicacies if you will. They were given an extra portion for each of their meals. And the first thing we see is them saying, no, we're not going to do it. Those are unclean. We can't eat that. Now to us today we think, well, it's no big deal. It's just unclean food. We're in the age of grace. So for us, a pork chop isn't that big a deal. Or something that was sacrificed to an idol, because we just don't see that sort of stuff anymore today. But for them, it was quite a stand. Think about it. Your country just got conquered. Crushed. Your temples, everything laid to waste. Now the king wants you to work for him. So the rest of your friends are thinking, you're kind of a traitor, aren't you? And then the king gives you all these fine foods. And as you learn about Nebuchadnezzar, you'll find out that Nebuchadnezzar was not a sane man. And you tell him, no, we're not going to eat it. And this causes quite a stir for him. But what happens when they refuse? Well, nothing really happened. Here on earth, anyway. A few days later, the eunuch comes back, checks on them. They're healthy, strong, just as fit as the people that were eating the unclean food. As the story progresses along, we find that Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were blessed by God for their stand. They were blessed with wisdom, knowledge, to the point that they were 10 times better than the magicians, the sorcerers, the enchanters, and all the Chaldeans. 10 times smarter. All because they took one little stand. They said, you know what, we're not going to do that. It was socially acceptable, encouraged, and actually, to be quite honest, forced. They said, no, we're not going to do it. As the story progresses, we find that Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And this is where we start finding out this guy's just not really right. He has this dream, and he tells all these magicians and sorcerers and enchanters and Chaldeans that you're going to tell me my dream, and then you're going to tell me what it means. And they're like, hey, king, what's the dream? And he's like, I'm not telling you. If you're worth anything, you have to tell me the dream and then interpret it. And if you don't, we're going to have you torn limb from limb. Sounds fair, doesn't it? Well, word finally gets to Daniel, and Daniel says, you know what, you ain't got to tear nobody apart. I'll tell you. Because remember, God blessed him with 10 times wisdom and knowledge and visions and dreams. So he goes to the king, and he tells him what his dream meant and all this. And he gets a promotion. So besides being in the royal court, he's now promoted to like a governorship, if you will, or a magistrate sort of position, a justice. And he promotes his 3 friends underneath him. And we find as the story kind of progresses along that these 4 men become very valuable to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, like I said, is not a sane man, if you will. So he sets up this image out on the plain of Dura. Now, this statue is 6 cubits wide and 60 cubits tall. So it's 10 times taller than it is wide. I imagine a good wind would blow it over. I'm thinking to myself, if this guy is such an egomaniac and rather maniacal, I'm thinking he's probably a short, fat guy if he has to build a tall, skinny statue because, he's trying to show himself off. And he has this big coronation plan. And he invites all the governors, the satraps, the prefects, the counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, all the officials from all the provinces of Babylon. We're going to have this big celebration, this big coronation service, a great big dedication thing. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people there, right? And they're told when they get there, as soon as the music starts, y'all got to bow down and worship this atrocious looking thing. And sure enough, the music starts. Now try to imagine this. You and 3 of your buddies are standing in a plain, in a field of Dura, which is just a big plain, open field. You got this giant hunk of gold standing in front of you. Music starts, everybody falls down. But you and your 2 friends, all 3 of you are standing there. You suppose you'd stick out like a sore thumb? Yeah, you sure would. Now you got to remember, these guys are politicians or in the court system, or like I said, it doesn't really say. So we all know from politics there's an awful lot of backbiting and backstabbing that goes on. So wouldn't you know it, it takes about that long for somebody to run up to Nebuchadnezzar and say, hey, look at those 3 Hebrews over there. Look at those guys. I think you ought to do something about that because they're disobeying you. They're showing you no respect whatsoever. And of course, they get called into the king's office, and the king tries to persuade them, leans on them a little bit, and their answer is where I want us to focus today. It starts out in verse 16 of chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, saying, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter, if it be so. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship your golden image that you have set up. We have no need to answer you in this matter. Their answer was instantaneous. They didn't hesitate. There was no, well, what do you think, guys? Suppose we ought to go ahead and go bow down to this thing? They didn't have to think about it. To them, the matter was already settled in their heart and in their mind. And this is what I like to call fast-acting faith. There was no question. There was no hesitation. There was no, well, I don't know, maybe I should. There was no doubt. It was instantaneous. And they already know that this guy's a megalomaniac. They already know he's a Hitler type or a Mussolini or someone like that. They know that this is a death sentence. Because he already told them that he's going to throw them in the fiery furnace. And he still answers so quickly. No, we have no need to answer you in this matter. We're not going to do it. And if our God will save us, he'll save us. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. And that's okay if he doesn't, because then the whole world will know that we stood up to you. And it kind of reminds me of a prayer I heard Jesus pray in the garden. Remember what he said? Father, if it is your will, remove this cup from me. But nevertheless, not as my will, or not as I will, but your will be done. And that's what these young men were saying. They're saying, you know what? We don't care if God saves us, great. But if God doesn't save us, that's great also. Either way, you are going to know that God was with us. So why would this matter to us today? We're talking about a story, even the reference to Jesus is over 2,000 years old. These young men were talking probably 4,000 years ago that this happened, way back in the BC era. So why does this matter to us today? We're so many centuries, millennium removed from it. It's because of the age that we're living in today. You see, there are laws being passed, there are things that are being done, there are churches that are under attack right now. The enemies of Christ are questioning our faith, they're questioning our religion, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We used to have to say or be able to say, you'd have to go to the Middle East to find where Christians are being persecuted, or to a communist country to find where Christians are being persecuted. But that's not the case anymore now, is it? It's happening right here. And as I said, we've read the back of the book, we know we win in the end. But we also know that those verses that lead up to that triumph are going to be very difficult for Christians. During the age, the time of God's wrath, Christians are going to be getting beheaded on a regular basis, daily. Millions of them. Hopefully, Lord will take us out of here by then. But until then, we have to live in the precursors of this age. Christ told us plain and simple that it will be as it was in the days of Noah, that the sins of the people will be heaped so high that they'll reach to heaven. Imagine trying to be the one righteous man in the one righteous family that stood for God. I don't think we're going to have to imagine it. Now, we're fairly safe, we think, living here in the Midwest. It's maybe not be the Bible Belt, but it's still a pretty conservative, Christ-oriented neighborhood. But let's be honest, folks. It's not always going to be that way. If you will, we're becoming dinosaurs. And it's not because there's not Christians. It's because Christians don't have fast-acting faith. They don't have courageous faith. What does this look like for us today? How do we apply and have fast-acting faith? You see, our faith is something that grows. Like our maturity and our reliance on Christ, it grows. And we can and do have a certain level of responsibility in this faith. It simply starts with prayer. And not just praying for the situation. We're all familiar with, I'm in a tough spot, I'm going to pray about this tough spot. It's also praying for those who are the instigators. It's also praying for those who are harassing you. Remember what Jesus told us, we have to pray for our enemies. It's also praying for the situation, that it works out. It's also understanding and reading our Bible. You see, because if we didn't know about these 3 Hebrew children and their story, how would we know that God is in those situations, is with us when we're being persecuted? Now, I want to make sure we draw a clear line here in regards to persecution. Remember last week we used the example of lying. All right, if you tell a lie, and it's a good one, big old fat whopper one, and you get caught, and people are mad at you because you lied to them and they don't trust you anymore. That's not having your faith tested. That's suffering the consequences of your own action. We're talking about like a situation maybe at work, or a situation when you're shopping, or a situation that you may face at home, when your faith is called directly into question. When people are upset with you, not because so much of what you've done, but because of who you are and whose you are. This standing firm, courageous faith, like I said, it's going to require a lot of prayer. It's going to require constant prayer. And it's also going to require accepting the fact that God may not save us. Think, well, that's not fair. Remember the reference to Jesus praying in the garden? Did Jesus' prayer save him from the cross? No, it didn't. These 3 young men, were they saved from the fire? No, they weren't. They still had to walk into the fire. And even if God didn't save them, they were ready to walk into that fire with a confidence that, here's what it said in verse 18, but if not, if God doesn't save us, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or your golden image. The part here that is important that we need to draw out of the scripture is they were willing to die because they knew that the king knew. And that if the king knew, you have to remember they were in court. There would have been a full court of people standing around them. That their faith in God, even if they died and were willing to die for it, would have been an encouragement to those who were standing around them. And would have been an encouragement to the king as well. You see, so often we get caught up in the me. What about me? Our faith isn't about me. It's about what God can do in the situation, not how it turns out for me. And the rest of the story, well, the king loses his mind again. He is beside himself mad. He's the kind of mad that makes you think, whew, that's a whole new kind of level of crazy right there. He heats that furnace up 7 times normal. I don't know how they fired the furnace. I imagine it wasn't with gas, so probably with coal and logs. They fired this bad boy up so hot that the guards who took Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego to the furnace to pitch him in it died on the spot. Think about that. How hot is that the guards that are walking you to your death die? And I catch something in the story that always makes me go, well, if the guards weren't there, why'd they get in the furnace? How'd they get in that furnace if the guards weren't there? The guards burn up and die before they get to the furnace. They still went into the furnace. And I've often thought, did they do that, or did God give them a little nudge? It's one of those spots in the Bible that makes me go, And as they're in the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar loses his mind again. And he starts asking around. Didn't we throw 3 guys in there? Seriously, it was 3 guys, right? He sees 4 men in the furnace. 4. Now, some translations say that 4th man was the Son of God. Some say it was the angel of the Lord. But either way, we know who that 4th man was. That was Christ. He was walking through the fire with them. You see, they weren't saved from the fire. They still had to go through the fire. But Christ was with them every single step of the way. And that little fact is something that we need to hang on to. And we can't lose sight of it. That at some point, we may have to walk through the fire. But when we walk through the fire, Christ is always there with us. And the Bible is very clear. Jesus even said that if they persecuted and hated me, they will persecute and hate you. But what else does he say? Lo, I am with you unto the end of this age. And in every situation, he is with us. It doesn't matter if we are bound and being led to the furnace. It doesn't matter if we're standing on the platform ready to fall in. He's with us. It doesn't matter if we're in the furnace and the fire is raging 7 times hotter than normal. He is with us. Right there. Well, something else I see that's a little interesting. Nebuchadnezzar fires this furnace up 7 times hotter than normal. He's going to teach these 3 guys a lesson, right? He's going to let them have it big time. And he's going to make sure that everybody in the king's court knows that this is what happens. You mess with Nebuchadnezzar, we're going to burn you up. We're going to throw you alive into a fire. But what happens? Well, it was Nebuchadnezzar that got the lesson taught to him and the rest of the governors and magistrates. See, in his haste to make the situation worse for them, he ends up making the situation worse for himself. He makes the lesson that he has to learn even bigger. They had the courage to let God use them to teach him something that was irreplaceable. And even though they were in a no-win situation, serving a no-win king, their faith stood firm. They were unmovable. And if you recall, they skipped out on the king's fancy food by refusing. They show a history Consistently choosing faith. Consistently choosing what was biblically acceptable over what is socially acceptable. You see, because it was completely socially acceptable, encouraged, and forced for them to fall down in front of that golden image or to eat that food. And they chose God's way each and every time. It's that demonstration of faith in the little things. It's the practicing of faith in the little things that builds us up and prepares us for the big things. You'll hear so many people say, and so many people will gung-ho, boy, I'm going all out for Jesus. If, a crazy person was walking the back of the door of the church today and start just raining bullets down on the place, I'd run right after him. I'd dive in. Really? You think so? But yet, you don't have enough faith to do the simple things or the little things. So many of us are a lot more like Peter, that when confronted with a little servant girl, probably no more than a teenage girl. So I don't know, man. Never met him. A couple times, 3 times. Your accent gives you away. You're Galilean. We know you know who Jesus is. Never met a man. I just happen to be here, warming myself by this fire. If you've been like Peter, there's hope. You see, because Peter was forgiven. And we can be forgiven too. Because I know there are times that each of us and all of us have failed to acknowledge God before our peers. So many of us have become closet Christians out of fear. And when we take that path of fear, and that fear of closet Christianity, it's fear that hems us in and keeps us in that little box. It keeps us on that straight and narrow path. When just on the other side of that fear, it's a huge, wide plain of God and His blessings and His work in our life. If you've chosen to go along socially with the flow, accepted that path of least resistance like Peter did, there is hope. He was forgiven. We can be forgiven. The same grace that saved him and restored him is the same grace that will save and restore us. All is not lost yet. Let's continue to pray and look to God as these times get more and more difficult for us. And they will. Let us be more like these 3 young men who, because of a history of faith, had the faith to stand up when it really mattered. Let's pray. Lord, forgive us for failing you, and we often do. There are so many times that through the day-to-day experience of life, we should stand for you. We could stand for you. And yet we choose to go with the flow and to say and do the things that are acceptable or expected. Lord, I pray that you would heal us and forgive us. And I pray that we would repent, not just for doing it, but repent in a way that we don't do it anymore. Lord, I pray that you would continue to bless us with that courage. And I pray that you would continue to give us opportunities to exercise our faith so that it may grow stronger and that more people can see you in us. Lord, we understand that it's not an easy task and it's not an easy thing we ask for. Lord, we know that you are more than capable and more than able to see us through any situation that we may face. And we thank you for those situations. And we thank you for the trouble that we may face, because we know that's just making us stronger and more courageous and bolder in our witness for you. In Jesus' name, amen.